Well, welcome everybody to today's webinar on KG ProTech, the fault simulation system designed and developed by CEO, founder, and head of everything, KG, Mr. George Homelach. Before I give George the mic, I did want to take a second just to make sure most of you have seen or heard some collateral, heard videos, or talked to your reps about what KG ProTech is. It's a very innovative system. As you've probably heard, it turns any car into a training center. Basically, using the KG app, you can import simulations flawlessly and effortlessly into your vehicle with no damage done to your car whatsoever. No piercing or damage to the cables or components. Saves you money both on replacement, but also in finding where those problems eroded over time. Water gets into the damaged cables and corrosion happens. You got to find and fix those parts. KG eliminates all those elements and lets you create any number of simulations and import into your vehicle, into any vehicle, whether it's my car as I'm driving to campus or yours as well, or any of your vehicles in your department fleet. It can work with anything with an ECU. So I'm very honored to have George Homelach, the CEO and founder of KG ProTech, join today and walk us through and give you a little narrated tour of exactly what KG ProTech is. George, I'll give it to you.
Thank you, David, for the introduction. Yeah, welcome everybody from my side as well. I'm very excited to share with you today more information about KG ProTech and how we help educators when it comes to setting up faults on their training vehicles. Before I dig into the details of our technology, I basically wanted to give you a bit of background about how we started this company. And really, when we set out to build this technology, our main mission was to make the life of an instructor, of an automotive educator, easier. We saw that it's still a lot of work to bug vehicles for automotive training, for diagnostic training, a lot of manual work involved in cutting wires and replacing components on those vehicles, hundreds and hundreds of hours to prepare those vehicles for training. And we thought there's got to be a smarter way to do this and a more digital way to do this. And that's why we developed the KG system, which essentially allows you in a few clicks to set up a fault, the fault that you want to set up on any type of vehicle, as David already explained. So that was sort of our mission at the outset, and since then we've developed our technology and implemented it with numerous customers in Europe and now also in the US. Yeah, and so excited to be here and share with you more about it. Speaking of sharing, I'm going to try to share my screen. So you should see this in a second. Perfect. Yeah, so as I said, our mission is really to automate all those different manual tasks that you still have to go through today when it comes to setting up your vehicles for diagnostic training and also for measurement training. All the training that happens around the vehicle, that's where we want to help. That's where we want to make your life easier. Now, before I talk about technology, a quick background about our company. We are based in France. We've had our head office is in Paris. Our R&D team is based in Le Mans, so next to the famous racing circuit. But we are present in multiple countries. So since last year in the US, but we already have loads and loads of clients in Europe, in France, Germany, Austria, and even up to Brazil. We work with different manufacturers. So on the passenger car side, we work with Renault and Nissan. For everything that's heavy duty diesel trucks, we work with Volvo and also Rheinmetall MAN when it comes to militarized trucks. And then last but not least, for the motorcycle side, we work with KTM, the motorcycle manufacturers. And alongside these vehicle manufacturers, obviously, we also work with different high schools and colleges all across the globe and help them when it comes to setting faults on their vehicles. So that's a brief background to our company. What is KG all about? As David said, our mission is really to turn any vehicle into a training aid. And we want to do that by letting any instructor create a fault on any type of vehicle directly from their smartphone or the computer. And when I say any vehicle, I really mean any vehicle. So not just passenger cars, not just traditional combustion engine vehicles, but also electric and hybrid vehicles, heavy duty diesel trucks, motorcycles, even farm and construction equipment, and up to military vehicles. So we're talking about a very universal and versatile technology that can really help you out in different training contexts on different type of vehicles. Now, the two main components of this technology you see here on the screen. It's the KG box and then also the KG app. So the KG box is a fault simulator that you connect to the vehicle and that implements the fault on the vehicle, right? And then the KG app is a an online application which lets you, as the instructor, set the parameters, configure your simulation that you want to run on this vehicle. Now, how does the KG box implement the fault on the vehicle? Essentially, it does it by manipulating the communication between an ECU and a system. For example, an engine ECU and the engine. And here the KG box is able to imitate a faulty signal and thus let the ECU and let the vehicle believe that there is a fault when physically on the component there is no fault. So essentially, the KG box mimics faulty systems and therefore creates a realistic scenario that then allows the learner to practice diagnosing a fault. All right. Now, how does this look like in practice? Essentially, what's important to understand is that we are technology in the service of the educator, of the instructor. So the decision what type of vehicle to use and what kind of fault to set on that vehicle, all of that remains the decision of the educator. But he should enter this information in the software in the KG app. So at the start of the session, you will select the vehicle that you have on site. You will select and configure the fault that you want to run on this vehicle. You enter this information in the KG app. And then this information is sent to the KG box. The KG box executes this command and then the vehicle reacts and shows the same symptoms as with a real fault. Right? So you really have a realistic scenario. And this allows the learner to practice diagnosing this fault from A to Z. So from the first stage where it's about analyzing the symptoms and looking at the information that's available on our diagnostic scope, and then moving on to formulating a hypothesis as to what could be the cause of these symptoms. And then in the third step, taking measurements with multimeter oscilloscope and interpreting these measurements, comparing them to manufacturer values, and then in the last step, just going over to saying, okay, this hypothesis was correct, and this initial hypothesis was incorrect. So our goal here is really to create a realistic and secure environment where the learner can go through all steps of the diagnostic process on a real vehicle, right? And guys, if at any point in my presentation you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. I much rather prefer that this is a dialogue than just a monologue. So don't hesitate to shoot your question while I'm presenting. Yeah, the KG app, if we talk a bit more in detail about the KG app, it's essentially a remote control for you, the educator, to configure, activate, and deactivate your simulation from your smartphone, from your computer. You can also use it from your tablet or a smart TV, anywhere where you have a navigator, a browser. You can go on our website, log in with your access details, and then you're good to go to run your simulation. Now, the big advantage of the KG app is that you can store the scenarios and simulations that you use most frequently directly in the software. So what many of our clients do is they get together at the start of the year. They say, these are the vehicles that we have available. These are the faults and the scenarios that we want to run on these vehicles for our training. And then they store all that in the software. And then all educators have access to these simulation, to these scenarios, and then they can use it in their trainings, in their exams. All team members have then access to these scenarios. Yeah. So it's an easy way to share knowledge. Maybe you have an educator who is more advanced on ADAS systems or on diesel engines. All of the colleagues can then feed into the library, store their simulations, and other trainers can use that. And that also allows you to guarantee consistent quality throughout your trainings and throughout your exams so that all students have the same conditions, they get the same scenarios as everybody else, and you can also document that consistency with our software. Now, if we talk about the KG box, as mentioned, you can use it on different vehicles, but you can also use it on different ECUs. So you're not limited to the engine. You can also use it on the brakes, gearbox, body electric, suspension, even ADAS system. So wherever you have an ECU, you can use the KG box. So very universal, and you can use it on different systems.
Hey,
And
George.
yes.
Yeah, there was a question basically asking when you say all vehicles, does that apply to marine vehicles as well?
So we have had clients who have reached out to us from, yeah, from the marine side. Essentially, these were clients who were using diesel engines on their boats. And so, in essence, these engines are not much different from yeah, a diesel truck engine. So yes, if that's the case, then absolutely, you can also use it for marine applications. All right. Yeah. So with the KG box, you have four types of fault actions available, and you can set these fault actions on each pin of the ECU. So if you think about an average vehicle, if ECU has between 150 and 200 pins for the engine. You have up to 800 different possibilities of faults that you can set on that engine. So the four fault types that you have available are open circuit, short circuit to ground, and these are typical traditional faults. Maybe you already do them for your training. And then you have voltage variation and PWM. Now with open circuit and short circuit to ground, the result of these faults is a binary. If you don't activate this fault, if you haven't activated this fault, there is a signal. If you activate the fault, there is no signal. The student will see no voltage on their multimeter. Uh, there's no signal, right? With voltage variation and PWM, you can actually go further and manipulate the value that your student is going to find on their diagnostic scope or the multimeter or the oscilloscope. So instead of signal, no signal, you can create a different signal. And this is really allows you to create a more complex scenario and pushes the student to go deeper in the analysis and also have a better understanding of the automotive system because they actually need to be able to interpret their reading and understand whether that's in line with manufacturer values or not. So, for example, with voltage variation, you could simulate a faulty sensor output, for example, a temperature sensor, which communicates the temperature with a certain voltage to the ECU. Here you can change the voltage, communicate a different temperature to the ECU, and then create all types of default trouble codes and symptoms on the vehicle. So here the student needs then to understand, okay, what is the correct value from the manufacturer and what do I see on my multimeter, right? And the same then also for PWM. Here you can work on actuators and manipulate the duty cycle of the actuator, and therefore then to manipulate the behavior of the vehicle and also create different fault codes. Yeah. So with these two advanced simulation options, you really can create quite advanced scenarios. And you can also show to the student, and this is for more advanced students, the different strategies of the vehicle. How does the vehicle react at 2 volt, at 3 volt, 5 volt, right? At what point does a fault code come up in my diagnostic scope? At what threshold does the vehicle change behavior? So this can be very interesting, especially for more advanced students.
Hey, George,
Yes.
another question, and I'm not gonna pretend to know what this abbreviation is, so apologies. The question is there an a YMM limit that this will work on? Most of my shop vehicles are 2009 or older. Oh, year, make, and model. Got it. Okay.
So no, we have no problem with 2009 vehicles. We have had clients who had vehicles from the early 2000s. I'd say 2002, 3, and we had no problem working on these vehicles. So as long as you have an ECU, you can use our technology. We'll try to find the necessary connectors for these ECUs, but usually, if we go up to early 2000s, that should not be a problem. If you have a vehicle from the 70s, maybe we'll have some trouble finding the connectors, but early 2000s should not be a problem.
And a part two to that, George, are there any pre-bugged diagnostic setups so that the instructor um, is able to kind of test everyone ahead of time, like we do with hardwiring a bug?
So the way I understand this is the question is whether we have preset faults that they can use already on the vehicle.
Yeah, any pre-bug diagnostic setups.
So at the moment, we really leave it up to the educator to decide what's the most relevant scenario, what's the most relevant bug for their students. But going forward, we will develop a few example simulations that educators can then use with their students for that training. So this is something we have on the roadmap. Today, it's really up to the educator to program and define those scenarios for themselves.
Great. Thanks, George.
Perfect. Yeah. So the KG app and the KG box are really only the two first products in our product suite. We also offer the KG auto cables, which are the connection cables to connect the KG box to your vehicle and the different ECUs there. And then we also offer the KG terminals, which is a measurement interface for the student, where the student can use a multimeter and oscilloscope to take measurements without having to pierce into the cabling and risking damaging the vehicle in the process. So KG terminals, KG box, and KG app are really universal. They don't change based on the vehicle. The only component that might change based on a vehicle brand that you're going to use are the KG auto cables. So typically, the KG auto cables will be the same for different models within the same brand. So within GM, you're going to have one set of auto cables for the engine. Within Toyota, you're going to have one set of auto cables for the engine. And for Volkswagen, you're going to have one set of auto cables for the engine. And with that set of auto cables, you can then cover different models within the brand. All right. So what we see with many clients is that they match these products as they need. So it's actually a modular system where you can use different components separately, right? You can just leave the KG auto cables connected to a different training, which not necessarily has anything to do with diagnostics. And that way you don't create any wear and tear on the connectors of the ECU. You can then connect the KG terminals and just do a training on taking measurements, right? Showing students how to properly take measurements with a multimeter, with an oscilloscope, showing students what a healthy signal looks like. And then once you have done that, you can add the KG box and actually go into fault finding, right? You can inject a fault with a KG box, create a faulty scenario, and show students how to diagnose these faults, right? So as I said, you can mix and match these different products, use them modularly, and you can also, for example, use 2 or 3 kg terminals at the same time, right? So it's a modular system that you can use as needed for your different training needs. The goal of all this is really to, as I said, make your life easier and help you save time, effort, and ideally also money in the process. Not only before, but also during training. So before training, we help by making the process of coming to your training scenario and preparing a vehicle much easier. What many of our clients tell us is when they get a new vehicle and they need to prepare it for their learners, for their students, they typically look into the wiring diagram. They study that, and then they come up with a couple of ideas of faults that they could set on this vehicle, how they could bug this vehicle. And then they spend 1, 2, 3, 4 days preparing the vehicle manually, cutting wires, implementing faulty parts. And then they test their fault, and unfortunately, many times they don't get the symptoms that they were looking for. So the vehicle didn't actually react as expected. Yeah, and unfortunately, this happens more often than we would like to admit. And it's a very frustrating experience for the educator because you spend so much time preparing the vehicle without having the result that you need for your students. Without technology, this process from idea to final scenario that I can use with my students becomes a matter of minutes instead of days. So you can have an idea, you looked at the wiring diagram, have an idea of a fault that you want to run, then you configure that in the KG app, in the software, run the fault on the vehicle, and then see how the vehicle reacts. And if you don't have all the symptoms that you need for your students, well, then you can readjust. You can change the parameters in the KG app, run it again, and go through these iterations in a matter of minutes until you come to your final scenario, final configuration where you have all the symptoms that you need for your students. So preparing a vehicle becomes much, much easier, much quicker with our technology. And then you can also store all of that, as we mentioned, you can store that in the KG app, in the software, and activate your scenarios in a matter of a few clicks. So on the day of the training, you have everything already prepared, all already stored in the software. You don't have to do anything on the vehicle. During training, yeah, our technology allows you to create more complex scenario very easily. So you don't have to touch anything on the vehicle. You can do that all from your smartphone or computer. And it makes it also much easier to teach larger groups because you can actually run scenarios and run faults on multiple vehicles in parallel. So each vehicle will have a KG box, and then from one computer, one smartphone, you can actually control all of these KG boxes. So you might have a first vehicle, a first group on the first vehicle, a second group and second vehicle, and the first group gets an easier scenario with an easier fault, and the second group, who is already more advanced, gets a more complex scenario. And you can activate and deactivate the faults as the different groups progress in their learning process. So here you can really be much more reactive with your students and also target the scenarios to the different student experience level. Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's the end of the presentation. I'd now jump to a short video where we show you what all of this looks like in practice. But I want to take a quick breather to, yeah, give you some time to ask any questions if you have any.
Everything's been asked, we've asked so far, but guys, feel free to come off mute if you have a question for George directly or drop it in chat either way. And then
Big
George will begin.
question is cost.
One more time, please.
The big question is cost.
Gotcha. Cost. So certainly you mentioned George mentioned the four components. You have the KG box, the terminal, the cables, and the app. So the variables would be are you which the cables, the vehicle could be a little higher, a little lower based upon the vehicle you're using, and then how long of the app, whether you have 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. Those variables would indicate or kind of dictate in the end the cost. The most commonly chosen subscription is 3 years. And educators in most cases are using the system, one set of cables, the box, the KG terminals, and the app for 3 years for under 20,000 US. And it can be a little more, a little less, depends on what vehicle you're building cables for. But your rep can help you get specific once we know what vehicle you're looking for, whether it's a Honda, a GM, or a Toyota.
Yeah, to your point, David, we recently launched product bundles for the major brands like GM, Toyota, also Volkswagen. And I think for the 3 year package, we were around 17,000, 18,000 for these brands. So that's about the price range for all of the four products.
Yep.
Perfect.
Thanks, George. And thanks you. Any other questions, guys, for George right now before he jumps through a little video tutorial? Okay.
Perfect. Okay, let's dive right into it. So here we see our system connected to the engine. We have the KG box, we have the KG terminals, and we have the KG app on our laptop. We also see we have some little overlays on the KG terminals. These will basically adapt to your vehicle. So we'll, based on the terminology of your vehicle, we'll provide you with these overlays, and they help the student to identify the right pin quickly. So they can basically then find pin 1 here, which will also be then pin 1 on the ECU and pin 1 in the wiring diagram. And you can see on the KG terminals, you have up to 200 measurement points that you can use very flexibly here. Okay. Yeah, the KG box we see here, we are connected via a LAN connection. You also have a wireless connection where you can connect the KG box to your local wireless network or also your phone's hotspot. It's very flexible. If you're ever in a situation where for some reason you don't have an internet connection, you can also program a simulation locally through the onboard touchscreen. So that's a backup if you're ever in that situation where you don't have an internet connection. All right. And then we're connected here through the KG auto cables to the engine ECU. The auto cables essentially form a bridge between the ECU and the engine harness. And on both sides, so on the ECU side and on the engine side, we have the possibility to connect the KG terminals for measurements. Right? And here in the middle is where we connect the KG box. Now I'm gonna jump a bit ahead to show you an example scenario. So this scenario will be working on the accelerator position, pedal position sensors of this vehicle. And here we see the screen of a diagnostic scope. So this is a multi-brand diagnostic scope. It's not part of our solution, but it's just to show you a bit the symptoms that come up when we activate the simulation. So show you a bit of what our technology can do. And so here on the scope, we see the two accelerator pedal position sensors, the signals of these sensors, and we see that they're around 16% when we have no acceleration, and when we accelerate, we see that both of them, red and white, they react together. Everything is healthy. Also on the dashboard, I don't have any notifications. No problem. Our vehicle is healthy. And now we go to the KG app and we configure our simulation. So we've already selected the vehicle that we have on site. We've also selected the connector and the system that we're going to work on. So in this case, the engine. And we have selected the fault that we want to run on the system. So an open circuit on the potentiometer of the accelerator. And now to activate this scenario, this fault, we're going to move the switch to green and then click on the button here at the bottom of the screen to update the session. Now, once I click that button, the command is sent to the KG box. And we see, okay, we have our fault activated. We have a notification on the dashboard. And we see on our diagnostic scope, the first sensor signal is completely cut. It's at 0. So it's only the second one that's reacting when I accelerate. Yeah, when I step on the accelerator. So the first thing is completely off because we activated an open circuit on there. Now, to show you how easy it is to remove that fault, we're going to go back to the KG app. We're going to move the switch to gray, right? Click on Update Session at the bottom of the screen. Now, the updated command is sent to the KG box again, and we're going to see that here now, the KG box removed the fault, so the notification on the dashboard is gone, and we see we have our signal back. It's back at 16%, and now both signals react simultaneously when I step on the accelerator. So everything back to healthy in a matter of a few clicks. I've activated the scenario that a student can work through and also deactivated it and left no damage on the vehicle. So that's a point that we haven't mentioned yet, but there's no damage to the vehicle, no damage to the warranty with our technology. And that makes it also very easy to use our technology on a loaner, on a vehicle that eventually you might have to return at some point. We see this is very common with diesel trucks, which sometimes are just available for a limited time. So here, with our technology, you have a lot of options to simulate faults without leaving any damage on the vehicle.
George, there was another question basically asking, can you use the KG box without the subscription app? And then what if, let's say the subscription runs out, um, can they continue to use the application?
Yes, so the answer is absolutely yes. Our system does not become obsolete if you don't use the KG app. As mentioned, you can configure faults directly on the KG box through the touchscreen. There are a couple of functionalities less, for example, the playlists. So when you store the simulations in the software, that's no longer going to be available if you do it locally on the KG box. But the main functionality of activating faults on a vehicle, that's still available on the KG box. So the system doesn't become obsolete if you stop or if you don't have any budget for the software. Having said that, I think virtually all our clients have bought the software as part of the package because they see the value in it, and it sets our solution apart from any other solutions in the market. So I do believe that it's worthwhile to have the software available.
I think we got them all. Any
Yeah.
any other questions, guys, or that maybe I missed, or that George can offer more on? Oh, thanks, Sean. Yeah, how do we contact your rep? So I'll do a follow-up to everybody. I'll include a copy of George's brief PowerPoint along with a link to the recording in case one of your colleagues wanted to watch once, or you want to watch part of it later on. I'll include in there kind of who your, I'll CC your sales rep so that you'll know who they are and they can reach out and provide more information as needed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just reading through the questions if
Yeah.
we missed any, but I think we covered them all. Yeah, somebody's asking, is there a handout available for the presentation? David, I think, yeah, as a follow-up, we'll send out,
Right.
the recording and some more information. So
Yeah.
stay tuned.
And another question came in, basically, what's the typical lead time for a system like this? So George mentioned earlier that we're looking to kind of identify what are the most commonly used and requested vehicles in auto programs across North America, and trying to preset those so we have them in inventory and we can provide those more quickly. Currently, when a customer submits an order, it depends on what vehicle they're getting. It may take a little longer or a little shorter, depends on how complex the vehicles are. If it's three cables, two cables, one cables, but typically we say between 2 and 3 months for from order to delivery. It could be even quicker with this new process of getting one of the mainstream items. Let's say one of the Ford F-150 cables we have. That matches your vehicle. It could be even quicker, but assume 2 to 3 months for delivery from order to delivery from George's lab in Le Mans.
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Another question. Actually, we have a number of our sales folks are at Skills USA this week. KG, obviously, we're here today, so we're not there. Well, actually, interesting because George and KG helped to lead some of the Euro skills programs a few years back. So we've worked with a couple of the state skills programs, and we're certainly looking to get into the national here. But George has actually been a partner with Euro skills. George, maybe you would talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, so yes, David mentioned we're a technical partner of Euroskills. So what they did there is they used us on different BMW vehicles for the engine management competition, and they basically programmed, I think, up to 8 faults at the same time. And essentially, when the competitor found and diagnosed the fault, they would remove the fault until, if all the faults were found, the vehicle would start. So they were very happy with our technology and our solution for that context because it really made it easy to set and reset the faults for the next competitor without having to do much on the vehicle. So I think our system is quite a good match for any context where you have a competition and need to quickly set up a vehicle for that competition because it just speeds up the process. As I said before, you can configure a fault in a matter of minutes instead of spending several days on that and having that insecurity whether that fault will stay robust and consistent over the length of the competition.
There was another question. You mentioned lots of vehicles, and maybe let me expand a little bit, and George can even go further. So far, just in the last year in the US, we provided KG systems for passenger vehicles, for large, it was a Volvo truck, a big semi. We've done it for, I think it was a Caterpillar excavator or front loader excavator. So really, as you mentioned, anything with an ECU, we've so certainly farm equipment, construction vehicles, large diesels, passenger vehicles. As one person asked, marine, certainly aviation. If there's an ECU involved, KG can help kind of identify fault issues. You can troubleshoot that without damaging the components. So yeah, anything with an ECU, pretty much. I think we did a Mack truck that was in the 80s, in the
Mhm.
1980s. So I know we can go way back. I doubt many of you have that, but if you do, let us know. We'll see if we can help you out.
Yeah, we also had John Deere agriculture equipment, right? Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, we did that. Yeah. Okay. Looking for any other questions? Let's see. Okay, great question. There was a question about training. Certainly. So here's what George has done. George, I'll jump in and you can take over. So what
Mm.
they've done to help provide hand-holding throughout the process, they have a series of it's 8 total deep dive videos when you include the intro one. They really walk you through a component at a time, the hardware, hooking up the KG box, hooking up the KG terminals, the cables, working offline, working online, all those in brief digestible videos that last between 4 and 12 minutes. Those are kind of your asynchronous elements. They're going to give you the chance to kind of review and be clear on the guidance to use the KG system. And then in addition, we'll be happy to provide online virtual training to kind of give you and your instructors a little deeper dive into what KG system's all about.
Yeah,
And
no.
I'm sorry, George, go ahead.
No, so yeah, as David said, we basically what we try to do with these videos is really capture 95% of the content that we cover in an in-person training and make it available to you whenever you need it at any point, right? So these are accessible to you at any point. We are also available to troubleshoot with you if you ever have any problems, and to jump on a Skype call, or not Skype call, a Zoom call, and to solve these problems. And obviously, there's a user manual available. So different ways to get used to using our technology, and maybe even some impersonal training with the help of EdTech Global.
Exactly. Okay, I think we've covered all the questions, George. Maybe a quick tease of some of the things that the team is working on the roadmap.
Yeah, so basically we have a couple of new product launches that we're gonna have later this year. So we already spoke a bit about the product bundles where we pre-packaged our system with the most commonly used connectors in the US, and where we really analyzed the different vehicles for the different brands to make sure that we have these cables in stock. We also be launching, so we spoke before about the four fault actions that are available: short circuit to ground, open circuit, voltage variation, and pulse width modulation, PWM. We'll be adding a variable resistance as well later this year. So we'll be able to do resistance faults with the KG box. So that's the main addition in terms of the technology. So here you'll really be able to go even further in terms of the faults that you can set.
And that's something to note. So when that comes out, any KG adapters, that'll flow automatically to their system. It's not an additional purchase. It basically adds to what you've already acquired. So when you order the KG system, any updates or kind of enhancements that George's team does flows automatically to you. Okay. I think we've covered all the questions. George, guys, anything else, please feel free to come up mute or drop it in the chat. I want to make sure we answer all your questions. And just to kind of recap, I'll send everyone that was on this call a link to the recording, also a copy of the brief PowerPoint that George walked through, along with a flyer, kind of gives you kind of the features and the highlights, elements around the KG system. I'll also CC your reps. You'll see who your local salesperson is. We have local coverage for KG throughout all 50 states in the US and DC. So we'll make sure we make that person known to you. Any questions, reach out to them or to me directly, and we'll make sure you get your questions answered.
Yeah, so really I think if this is interesting for you guys, the next step would be sort of to send us the VIN number for your vehicles, and then we can match that with our product bundles, and actually recommend to you which bundle is the right one for you, and get you started for that. So that will be sort of the next thing to send to our local sales rep.
Great reminder. So yeah, great follow-up, guys. So please let us kind of provide, here's what it would look like for you if you wanted to get KG for your Ford F-150, for your Toyota Corolla, you name it, and we'll kind of provide you that in detail so you know exactly what you're looking at if you wanted to order this for your program. And again, any questions, we'll let your rep be known to who you are so they can make sure they're providing any answers or questions to issues you have. Let us know. George, I'll give you the last word here.
No, really, that's it. I hope this was interesting for you guys. Let us know what vehicles you have, and we can reach out to you. And if you have any questions afterwards, yeah, please reach out to us. We are happy to jump on another call for you, for your local, for your team, with your instructors. Happy to share more information about our system.
Great. George, thank you. Everyone that joined today, thanks so much. Look for a note from me following up, and hope you have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.